Good afternoon, thank you for joining me. I am Precious Mzea Sakaleji. Welcome to Camnet TV Midday News. The headlines. Doctors continue with protest as PF orders for their immediate dismissal. FRA sets 150 kwacha as buying price for 50 kg bag of white maize. Join me with the Midday News in detail after this commercial.
Has revived Kawagwa Tea Company, which was non-functioning before the PF government assumed office. This is meant to promote industrialization and job creation. So far, the company has employed 850 people, with the majority being women. Vote Edgar Chagolungu and the PF that have brought you change.
And now the Midday News in detail. The Food Reserve Agency FRA has announced that it will this year be buying a 50 kilogram bag of white maize at 150 kwacha, while that of soya beans will begin at 500 kwacha. Speaking at a media briefing held in Lusaka Monday morning, FRA Board Chairperson Kelvin Hawezia says the agency is targeting to purchase not less than 500,000 metric tons of white maize and 50,000 metric tons of soya beans. Mr. Hawezia adds that the agency will also be buying 40 kilogram bag of paddy rice at 200 kwacha. He says the prices are not floor prices, but the amount that the FRA will be buying the crop under the principle of willing seller and willing buyer. Mr. Hawezia has since encouraged millers to buy sufficient stocks to sustain their milling business, as the agency will not offload maize from the strategic grain reserves.
In the past few years, the Food Reserve Agency FRA has failed to meet the said target for maize, soybeans and paddy rice purchase owing to the late entry into the market and what the farmers term low prices offered by the agency for their produce. But this year, the agency is set to mend the loops and ensure that the country continues to have enough stock feed. To that effect, FRA has targeted to purchase not less than 5,000 metric tons of maize, which it says will be bought at 3 kwacha per kilogram, amounting to 150,000 kwacha per 50 kilogram bag of white maize. FRA Board Chairperson Kelvin Hawezia, who briefed the media in Lusaka, adds that the agency will buy soya beans at 10 kwacha per kilogram, resulting in a 50 kilogram bag going at 500 kwacha, while a 40 kg bag of paddy rice will be going at 200 kwacha.
The Food Reserve Agency will buy maize this season, will buy white maize this season at 150 kwacha per 50 kilogram bag of maize. They will buy soybeans at 500 kwacha per 50 kgs bag of soybeans. They will buy paddy rice at 200 kwacha per 50 kilogram bag of paddy rice. Sorry, per 40. Sorry, the Vice Chairman is correcting me here. Sorry, paddy rice will be 200 kwacha per 40 kgs. Paddy rice will be 200 kwacha per 40 kg bag.
Mr. Hawezia says it is anticipated that the FRA prices will not disadvantage the private sector, who are expected to purchase the large share of the 3.6 million metric tons of maize produced in the 2020-2021 farming season.
These are not floor prices. These are our prices as FRA, meaning the private sector is free to come on the market and offer their own prices. Are we together? We have not set these as floor prices, no.
And the agency wants millers to buy sufficient stock of their own from the farmers to sustain their milling business, as the agency will not offload maize from the strategic grain reserves.
It is anticipated that the Food Reserve Agency prices shall not disadvantage the private sector. This year's maize bumper harvest of 3.6 million metric tons, and in line with government policy, millers, and I want to make a clarion call here to millers, millers are being encouraged to buy sufficient stocks of their own from the farmers to sustain their milling businesses, as FRA will not offload maize from the strategic grain reserves, which ideally is meant for national emergencies as prescribed in the FRA Act.
For many years now, farmers have cried for a good pricing of their produce in order to make the farming business profitable. It is hoped that with the announced prices by the agency, the many years of suffering will be wiped and farmers will be the next millionaires in Zambia. Prudence Chota, reporting for Camnet TV News.
In other news, the go slow for resident doctors has entered day 4 as demands to release some doctors who have been arrested by the Zambia police heighten. Resident doctors on Friday commenced their go slow after a failed government promise to meet their demands. On Sunday, Resident Doctors Association President Dr. Brian Sampa demanded that police release his colleagues because they have not committed any crime other than demanding what was promised. Meanwhile, it was later learned that the doctors were dispersed by the police, while Dr. Chikonde Mukula, who was arrested on the Copyboat on Sunday, is said to have been released and his charges dropped. Dr. Mukula is the current Resident Doctors Association Secretary General.
Release Dr. Chikonde, reinstate Dr. Sampa, employment of unemployed doctors, salary arrears, sending in allowances, promotions. Why should an SRMO, registrar or consultant get paid a doctor's salary?
Monday, the go slow by the resident doctors entered day 4. The directive by the Resident Doctors Association of Zambia was that all emergency departments should be manned by the people on call. Emergencies on the wards should be attended to, while those not on call should report for work at 08 hours and assemble at a selected meeting point until 16 hours, which is knocking off time. The doctors felt cheated after the government failed to pay arrears and settling in allowances, gratuities, and creation of some positions and the employment of more than 500 doctors. However, the move has seen the association president, Dr. Brian Sampa, having his license revoked by the Health Professions Council of Zambia, HPCZ. Others have since been arrested. But the doctors remain firm on their stance and are demanding that those arrested be released.
What about the money that is being splashed in the communities? They are seeing. These are not blind people. They hear things, they see things. So that puts the leadership of the association in a predicament, because you cannot go back to tell the membership that there's no money, but they are seeing what is happening. The other issue that has been raised is the issue of the president for Resident Doctors Association of Zambia, Dr. Sampa, who has been suspended by the HPCZ. Also, that really, is it really necessary? The membership feel that it is not necessary, and also there's an issue of one of the resident doctors who's been incarcerated by the police, Dr. Chikonde. We do not even know where he is, but all we know is that he was captured yesterday in the night and charged with espionage. So we are not aware, we don't know where our member is. The family members keep calling.
They are concerned that government leaders have been flashing money for political gains, yet their issues remain unattended to. They want President Edgar Lungu to address their issues.
Lives, but instead is at the police office. Is it wrong, surely, to ask that you are given that which you are owed? I think these things have escalated really quickly, and I'm just appealing to the conscience of the leadership of this country, specifically the President of Zambia, His Excellency Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu. If he is able to watch this, please, sir, we are just doctors, we are not politicians, we have no fight with anyone. We are just appealing that we are heard, sir, and we are given what is due to us. And everything will be back to normal. The doctors will go on to do their duties. They are only asking that we hear the 4 things that have been raised by the doctors.
Meanwhile, Movement for Multi-Party Democracy MMD spokesperson Dr. Kefas Mukuka has condemned the suspension of the practicing license for Dr. Brian Sampa.
We are condemning the suspension because we note with a serious regret that the case involving the go-slow of the said doctors is purely a labor matter, and at no time are police supposed to get involved. The police can only get involved if at all the doctors got riotous along the way.
By broadcast time, efforts to get a comment from the Zambia police on the arrests of some doctors proved futile. Patrick Soko, Camnet News.
Meanwhile, Patriotic Front PF Media Director Antonio Mwanza is disappointed at the behavior of the resident doctors who have now entered day 4 of their go slow. Mr. Mwanza tells Camnet TV News that the PF has been reliably informed that the resident doctors are being pushed to behave this way by a non-political figure at the expense of the people who need their services. He says the aim is to put the name of the government into disrepute. Mr. Mwanza has since urged government to fire all the doctors that are on the strike and employ people that are willing to work for the people. He says these doctors are playing politics and should be allowed to go the political route which they want.
We have impeccable information that these doctors have been meeting a non-political leader in this country with the sole purpose of bringing the government down. And we know that from those meetings they have agreed that they want to escalate their strike and try to entice nurses and other public service workers to down tools to bring the PF government down. And we will not sit aside and look while the lives of the Zambian people, the lives of the patients to which these doctors have vowed to save, are being lost because these doctors don't want to work even after they have been paid. We therefore call upon the government to quickly move in and dismiss all the resident doctors who are on strike.
The Non-Governmental Gender Coordinating Council NGOCC has called on government to devise more holistic and non-selective approaches in the manner corruption is being fought. Commenting on the recent conviction and subsequent sentencing to 2 years with simple imprisonment of former minister in the Ministry of Community Development and Social Welfare, Ms. Emerin Kabanshi, NGOCC Board Chairperson Mary Mlenga has noted with concern that some cases are dealt with faster than other cases, such as those cited in the Auditor General's reports and that of the fire tender, among others. In this regard, NGOCC has further called upon the investigative wings, especially the Anti-Corruption Commission SCC, to expedite all pending investigations regardless of who is involved. Mrs. Mlenga notes that corruption is an endemic cancer that must be rooted out of the fabric of our society as it diverts public resources from the national treasury to pockets of a few selfish individuals. Corruption affects women and children in more ways than one, given that they are the most vulnerable in our society. She says NGOCC remains resolute in promoting good governance as a fundamental principle of inclusive and equitable development for all.
The silence on the part of government and our investigative wings surrounding these cases is too loud. It is becoming abundantly clear that in some cases, the wheels of justice move with speed, while in other cases, the pace remains slower. As the saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied. NGOCC calls upon the government to devise more holistic and non-selective approaches in the manner corruption is being fought. We further call upon the investigative wings, especially the Anti-Corruption Commission or ACC, to expedite all pending investigations, regardless of who is involved. Corruption is an endemic cancer that must be rooted out of the fabric of our society, as it diverts public resources from the national treasury to pockets of a few selfish individuals. Corruption affects women and children in more ways than one, given that they are the most vulnerable in our society. It is undebatable that income and gender inequalities relegate women and children to the peripherals of development, thereby rendering them more vulnerable when it comes to critical basic social services like health, education, and social protection, which oftentimes remain poorly resourced.
Well, that news item brings us to the end of Camnet TV Midday News. But before we go, here are the headlines once again. Doctors continue with protest as PF orders for their immediate dismissal. FRA sets 150 kwachas buying price for 50 kg bag of white maize. Thank you for joining me. I am Precious Mzea Sakaleji. Continue watching Camnet TV, not just another channel. Good afternoon.